Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, coming at you live to talk about episode 8 of the anime series Princess Principal. Holy hell, man. Finally, we get the answers as to who exactly Ange is to Princess and vice versa, the entire framework of their relationship going back to their childhoods when they were first introduced to each other. And some of it falls in line with speculations I put forth in these, video discussions and everything like that. But man, I loved every drip and minute of it. And it actually kind of reminded me a little bit of the classic story Anastasia in places as well, because of course we're dealing with a princess who was swapped out with a duplicate in a sense, and there are similar, fleeting aspects of that original Anastasia story that are kind of similar. And you could say that this series maybe has taken a little bit of inspiration from that, arguably so. But of course, it's very different in the fact that there's a lot of espionage and spy stuff, James Bondy kind of stuff going on in this series. But it still reminded me of that because we're dealing with someone who was once a princess who had to sort of leave that behind and was swapped out for somebody who was actually much lesser than she had been in the case of the original Ange, who is the princess and Charlotte we know today. And it's absolutely gobsmacking and fascinating that we finally got the answers. I was afraid watching this episode that they were going to leave it ambivalent as to which was which, but finally by the end with Ange's story to the little street urchin girl she meets in this episode, she lays it flat out on the table that she was the princess originally, and she met this doppelganger street urchin girl who came in just out of the blue one day, and because they looked so identical, they started playing around with that. They started, swapping clothes and having little fashion shows and all this stuff. And because in her youth, the original Charlotte, that is Ange as we know her today, was so, living this well-to-do but stuffed, shirted lifestyle, she wanted to escape it. She felt like there was nothing there. She was surrounded by nothing that really enticed her, really challenged her, or really, just broadened her horizons in any way. And she needed out. She wanted to experience the world outside of that encapsulation. And here with this doppelganger that was the original Ange and the princess we know today, that was allowable. That was something they could achieve. And so, of course, there's this sort of, insurrection that happens, which threatens to part them for good. But they end up reuniting. I did not expect that, one last time before finally they're ripped apart for some time, until they are reunited at the start of the series again. And it's just absolutely fascinating that the original Ange, that is Princess, is the princess as we know her today. She became so consumed with and applied so much of herself out of necessity, out of the threat of her very life, being at stake for all intents and purposes if they found out she was false, she was fake. But she managed to successfully, I think Ange says, in telling this story, flashbacking on when this all happened, she learned like 9 languages, and she applied herself to learn to read music, and playing piano was something she became very consumed with and grew a passion for, and all these things. So Princess is not, it's kind of been my estimation like, well, what is she doing as a part of this group? She doesn't really bring a whole hell of a lot to the table. She's the figurehead, but there's not really much in the background. And suddenly with this episode, are we given so much more well-to-do depth and gravitas to her character to see what she went through when she was thrown, inadvertently into this princess lifestyle. She made it her own. And now she is a princess through and through. She's lived up to that. She's made that who she is. And it's really heartening to see Ange telling her, you did good. You did better than maybe I could have done had I tried to apply myself. And you're even carrying on the torch in the stead of what I wanted to do, become the queen and set things right, set things lawful, and create peace and create equality in the economics and everything like that, the social dynamics. This is Princess. This is the former street urchin that was once known as Ange, who is now fully evolved into the genuine princess. And conversely to that, did we have the original princess that was Charlotte, who is now Ange, having to suddenly be thrust into a life of no cushioning, and she had to really forge a lifestyle for herself. She had to survive of her own accord for so many years, and she fell into that spy lifestyle because this was still her way of living up to those dreams and those hopes and those aspirations she had outlined with, Charlotte, basically the new Charlotte, back when they were children, when she said, "This is what I want to do. I want to become queen. I want to set things right." Well, she lost that opportunity because of this divide, and they both become these new separate roles now. They're both these different people than they were when they were children. But Anj has embraced sort of the strangeness and the madcapness, the madness of living a spy lifestyle and working from behind the scenes, working, trying to work within the machine, but outside of it at the same time. And it's such an interesting contrast, the dichotomy between these two souls, these two characters who were very different. They were polar opposites, and that's why they were attracted to each other in their childhoods. And they both took on each other's persona and each other's lives, and they seem to have, for all intents and purposes, even though they are surrounded, they're found amidst all of this rebellion and this espionage and all this stuff that's going on. They seem to have prospered for it and found their natural callings in spite of all of that. And that to me is just absolutely captivating, And then, of course, you had sort of the beeline aspect of the episode where you had this little girl who, looking at some of the early footage in the PV and everything like that, I thought maybe it was Beatrice. She looked like a doppelganger for Beatrice, all told, but this little street urchin girl who Anj ends up telling this story to and subsequently teaching her how to pickpocket for survival because she's poor. She's being beaten and manhandled, and I swear, every a-hole that, kicked her around, or like the guy that was beating her with the whip and everything, I was cringing something fierce. If I could have reached into my screen and choked out a bitch. That's three. The three we see manhandling and abusing this poor little child. And then you find out there's a whole other group of children as well. Like that was something that really spoke to Anj in the life that she was suddenly thrust into, in having lost the opportunity to remain the princess and everything like that. She had to survive on the streets. She had to learn to survive, and she's passing on that tutelage, that knowledge to these little street urchins. And she even goes back and saves them, kind of like what they did with the laundry, the group of laundry women in the previous episode. She goes and seeks out the children where their home is, and tells them about an orphanage that they can go to that's much more prosperous, where they won't be so abused. At least that's the hope. Fingers crossed. If Anj is leading them there, that is probably the case. It's a better case scenario than where they find themselves, at least in the here and now. And I loved that. It did feel a little bit wonky because I didn't feel quite like we got to know this new little girl that much. I mean, I was much more interested in what was going on in the storytelling, the flashbacking to Anj's and Princess's origins and how they did swap and everything like that. And that was much more compelling to me. And so I found the rest of those aspects with the little street urchin girl to be somewhat breezy, and I wasn't as focused upon them, but I was still happy in the end. I was satisfied of that affirming ending that Anj, she felt sort of reminded of what she had to go through. And she wanted to do something better. This is another opportunity where we've seen her being almost, princess-like, giving out these wonderful, beneficial scenarios to these low, characters. These really downtrodden characters. She's making their lives that much better. She's actually living the promise and the principle, the princess principle, in her every waking action, in the way she interacts with her comrades, in the way she interacts with the spies they go up against. And we finally got a sort of a fleeting call to the, African American or African European, whatever she is, right-hand woman of the Duke of Normandy. I think Anj called her Gazelle. I guess that's like a code name. They said another name as well. I'm not really sure what, which name was which. That's her first name. They were talking about the last name and whatever like that. But this was the woman that killed Dorothy's father And she's the woman who is aware that somebody out there, there's a daughter out there who knows what was supposed to happen. And I'm still wondering, because this is going to be a reoccurring situation, a reoccurring scenario with these reoccurring characters, Duke of Normandy and this woman Gazelle, if that is in fact her name, you know, whether or not that's going to rear its ugly head at some point going up against our regular girls, and what's going to happen in the fallout of that as a consequence. So yeah, I mean, this was a spectacular episode. Again, I didn't really find myself so, you know, captivated by everything that was going on with the street urchin girl, but I was happy that there was an affirming ending there as a result of Ange's influence, and being able to see that the title of this series, Princess Principal, it's all about the way Ange conducts herself and conducts her life and the choices she makes. That is the Princess Principal, and the dichotomy there between these two individuals, the original Ange, who is now Charlotte the Princess, the original Charlotte, who is now Ange the Spy. It's just really compelling to me, and I love it. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of this particular episode of Princess Principal, if you've seen it as well, if you found it as gobsmacking and compelling as I did, captivating as I did. If not, why not? Let me know in the comments below, but I'd be surprised, frankly, if you've been enjoying this series, if you found it faltering at all, you know, that kind of thing. But of course, I love having that conversation, so anything goes in the comments below. Otherwise, it'll be pretty much it for me on this. If this video finds you well, and I'll catch y'all later. Peace.